Hello there and welcome to a Partners in Crime tutorial on how to make a Shatterize style text shatter effect in Blender 3D version 2.68. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is press X on your keyboard and click delete to delete the default cube. Next, press numpad 1 on your keyboard to go into front view. Then press Ctrl Alt numpad 0 to bring your camera into front view. Now, to add some text, we're going to go into the top left of the screen here, click Add, and click Text. Rotate the text 90 degrees on the X-axis by pressing R and then X and then 90. Press Enter. Okay, now press Tab to go into text edit mode. Erase this text and type your own custom text. For this tutorial, I'm just going to type video shatter. Press Tab to go out of text edit mode and go into the right of the screen here and go into the text object data tab. Scroll down. And under paragraph and align, click center. This centers the text on the origin. Okay, so now I'm going to move the text down on the Z-axis so that it's more in the center of the screen. And I'm going to click this folder here and open a font I have stored on my computer. Okay, I'm just going to use Orbitron Medium. Change the offset of this to -0.02. Okay, so now I'm going to change the resolution to 25 and go into the materials section to add a new material and go into the texture section to add a new texture. Change the texture type from clouds to image or movie and open in image. Okay, I'm going to use a texture I found on a site called Lost and Taken if you want to Google it. Okay, click this color section here and I'm going to bump up the contrast on this to 2.77. Scroll down. I'm going to stretch this out a bit here. And under geometry, I'm going to check normal. Okay. So now we've made our material for our text. We're going to adjust our lighting. Right click on this lamp here to select it. Scroll up. Change the lamp type from point to sun and check this layer only. Press R to rotate this lamp so that it's facing downwards. Okay. Now press G and then Y on your keyboard and move it up a bit on the Y axis. Press Shift D to duplicate it, move it to the side here, and change the lamp type from sun to spot. Okay. Bump up the soft size to 0.4 and change the number of samples to 4. And we're going to press R on our keyboard to rotate the spot lamp we've created so that it's facing our text. Okay. Now, using your middle mouse button to pan around the screen, I'm going to move this lamp up on the Y-axis to the side a bit here on the X-axis. Press numpad 0 to go back into front camera view. Press RZ to rotate this spot lamp so that it's facing our text. Move it on the X-axis here. RZ. Alright. Let's see how this looks by using the middle mouse button to pan. Pull it back on the Y-axis and press numpad 0 to go back into front camera view. Okay, so now go into the world settings to the right of the screen here and change the horizon color to black and press F12 to render and see how this looks. Okay, so we've got some nice text here. So I'm going to go back into 3D view by pressing F11 and I'm going to go into the render layer section and I'm going to type main text in this box here. Click the layer section and click the first layer tab so that our main text is the first layer. Okay, so we're going to right click on our main text here and I'm press Shift D to duplicate it. Right click to cancel the movement and go into the materials tab here. Delete the material that we created and add a new material. Bring the diffuse on this material down to black. Okay, and go into the text object data tab to the right of the screen here and bump up the bevel depth to about 0.022. Alright, now we're going to press G and then Y on our keyboard to move this text so that it's just slightly behind the first text that we created. Okay, now we're going to press M on our keyboard and click the second layer tab here to move that text to the second layer. Now right click on one of your lamps, hold down Shift and right click on the other lamp and press Shift D to duplicate both of those lamps you selected. Right click to cancel the movement and press M and click the second layer to move those lamps to the second layer. Now hold down Shift and select the second layer at the bottom of the screen here. And go into the render layer section, click this plus here, and we're going to name our second layer bevel text. Click the second layer tab here so that our second layer is the bevel text layer, and press F12 to render. Okay, so now to combine these two layers together so that we can see them, we're going to go into the compositor. Check use nodes and check backdrop. Organize your nodes a bit and add output viewer. Okay, now what we're going to do is left click on our main text render layers node to select it and press Shift D to duplicate it. Change this from main text to bevel text and add an add node. So we're going to click add color mix, hook it up after our main text node and change it from mix to add. Hook our bevel text up to the input of this add node and hook the add node output to the viewer node's input. Okay, so now we can see our bevel text in the background. I'm going to bump the factor on this up to 5 so we can see it more clearly. Like bump it up a bit higher, 5.5. Okay, that'll do for now. Okay, so now I'm going to add a couple of nodes for our main text render layers node. Add filter glare, hook it up after our main text render layers node. Change the glare type from streaks to simple star. Change the quality from medium to high. Drag the number of iterations down to 2. Change the threshold to something low like 0.164. Okay, and I'm going to make the fade 0.868. And uncheck rotate 45. Okay, now I'm going to add color RGB curves. Hook it up after our glare node there. Go into the red levels and lower them slightly, and go into the blue levels and raise them just a bit. Okay, so now our text is a bit more bluish. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into default 3D view, and I'm going to click this plus here to add another layer. I'm going to name this layer glowing text. Click the third layer tab here so that our glowing text is the third layer, and I'm going to right click on the first text that we've created, press Shift D to duplicate it, right click to cancel the movement, and press M and click the third layer to move that text to the third layer. So now at the bottom of the screen here, I'm going to click on the third layer so that only that layer is visible, and I'm going to go into the material section to the right of the screen here, delete this material, add a new material, and I'm going to make this material emit by 1. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to cover this text up so that only a small section of each letter is shown. So what I'm going to do that is I'm going to go into the top left of the screen here, click add, mesh, and click plane. Rotate the plane 90 degrees on the x-axis by pressing R and then X and then 90. Press enter. Press G and then Y on your keyboard to move this plane up slightly on the y-axis. And I'm going to size this up on the x-axis by pressing S and then X, sizing it so that it's past our text here. And I'm going to add a new material for this. Change the diffuse to black and change check shadeless here. Okay, so now I'm going to press tab to go into the edit mode for this object, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate all of the vertices. Move them up just a bit so that there's only a small space in between these 8 vertices. Press tab to go out of the edit mode for this object and move it down. Alright, I want to make it just a bit bigger space between them. Alright, okay, hold down Shift and select the other 2 layers at the bottom of the screen here. Go into the render layers section and make sure your layer is set up, and press F12 to render. Okay, so now we're going to add our glowing text layer in the compositor. Organize your nodes a bit. Select your add node here, press Shift D to duplicate it, and select your bevel text render layers node, press Shift D to duplicate that. hook the bevel text, change the bevel text to glowing text, and hook the output of this add node to the input of the composite node. Okay, so now I'm going to add filter blur, change it to fast Gaussian. Okay, so let's add filter blur. Okay, hook our glowing text to it and hook the output of this blur node to the input of this add node here. And now you can see the layer that we just created. Change the X and Y blurs to 8. Alright. And I'm going to add filter glare. Hook it up after our blur node there. Change the glare type from streaks to fog globe. Change the quality to high and bring the threshold all the way down to 0. Okay. So now we've got a nice little glow there. Add color RGB curves. Hook it up after our fog glow here. Okay. Go into the red levels for this and lower them. And go into the blue levels and raise them. Alright, so now we've got a nice blue glow here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into default 3D view and I'm going to add another layer. We're going to start making our particles. So click this plus here and type particle layer in the box there. Select the fourth layer tab. Okay, and what we're going to do is select the first layer tab at the bottom of the screen here so that we see the first layer alone. Right click on our text on the first layer, press Shift D to duplicate it, right click to cancel the movement, and press M and click the fourth layer to move our text to the fourth layer. Okay, select the fourth layer at the bottom of the screen here so that we only see the fourth layer, and go into the material section and press the 2 on this material, and go into the texture section and press the 2 on this texture here. Go back into the material section and we're going to name this material particle material. Alright, now we're going to delete this text by pressing X and clicking delete. Click the second layer tab here, right click on the text we have on the second layer, press Shift D to duplicate it, right click to cancel the movement, and press M and click the fourth layer to move that text to the fourth layer. Click the fourth layer tab at the bottom of the screen here. Change this material to the particle material that we've just created. Okay, and now I'm going to convert this text to a mesh. Now once I convert the text to a mesh, I cannot edit the text, so if you want to type your own custom text, now's the time to do it. So I'm just going to press Alt C and under Convert To, click Mesh from Curve Meta Surf Text. Okay, so now I'm going to jump to frame 50. And I'm going to press spacebar on my keyboard and type Quick. And click Quick Explode. Okay, so now we're going to go into the particles section for this. Under emission, change the number of particles to 10,000. Alright. Let's see, change the in frame on these particles to 79. And we're going to change the lifetime to 20. Okay. Under emitter geometry here, change the normal to 2.632. Scroll down, and we're going to click the fill weight section here and drag the gravity all the way down to 0 so that gravity doesn't affect these particles. Okay, so now we're just going to play this to see how it looks and see the particles coming off our text there. Okay, press numpad 0 to go back into camera view, and let's see. I'm going to click the third layer at the bottom of the screen here. Right click on these planes and press M and hold down Shift and also select the fourth layer by left clicking the fourth layer tab here. Now what this does is it makes it so that these planes that we created are on both the third and fourth layers. Okay, now I'm going to select the fourth layer here select our particle object by right clicking it and cancel the movement. And I'm going to go into the materials section and make this particle material emit by 1. Okay, so now I'm going to hold down Shift and select all the other layers at the bottom of the screen here, and go into the render layers section and make sure you've got your layers set up, and press F12 to render. Alright, so we've still got our glare effect there. Go into the compositor so you can add your particles. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select our glowing text render layers node, press B to box select, and drag your cursor over these 4 nodes here while left clicking, and press Shift D to duplicate these nodes, move them over here, and select the add node that we've got here, press Shift D to duplicate it, hook the output of this add node to the input of the composite node. Let's see, I'm gonna make another add node. Okay, so select this add node here, press Shift D to duplicate it, hook it up to this add node here. What we're gonna do is left click on the glare node to select it, hold down Shift and select the RGB curves node, press Shift D to duplicate these nodes, and hook this glowing text output to the glare node's input, and hook the RGB curves output to the input of the add node, and do the same for the other RGB curves node here, and change it from glowing text to particle layer. Okay, so now I'm going to bring the X blur on this down to 0, and I'm going to bump up the Y blur to 14. Alright, so now we've got a nice particle effect there. Let's see, I've got one more layer to add, so I'm going to organize these nodes here, move them out a bit further, and I'm going to go back into default 3D view, and I'm going to press this plus here to add another layer, and we're going to name this layer flare layer. Okay, and this is going to be the 5th layer, so click the 5th layer tab. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the top left of the screen here, click add mesh plane, rotate this plane 90 degrees on the x-axis by pressing R and then X and then 90, press enter, press G and then Y to move this plane up on the y-axis. Okay, and I'm going to size it up here fairly large. Okay, and go into the material section for this and add a new material. Go into the texture section and add a new texture. Change the texture type from clouds to image or movie, and open an image. Okay, I'm just going to open a flare that I made using the same method used in the flares tutorial. Okay, scroll down and click this image sampling section here. Under alpha, check calculate. Scroll down, let's see, and under influence and diffuse, check alpha here. Okay, scroll up, and I'm going to go back into the material section here, check transparency, bring the alpha and specular down to 0, and change the emit value to 1. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to press in on our keyboard so that this menu over here pops up, and click this display section here, and under shading, change it from multi-texture to GLSL. Okay, press M to get rid of that menu, and okay, go to the bottom of the screen here under viewport shading and change it to texture. Okay, so now we can see our flare there. Press M and click the 5th layer to move it to the 5th layer, and hold down Shift and click the 5th layer so that we can see the 5th layer. Okay, So we've got a nice flare there. If you ever accidentally get your cursor out of center, press Shift S and click cursor to center. Okay. Use your middle mouse button to pan around. The plane's pretty good. Okay. So now press numpad 0 to go back into camera view. And what we're going to do is we're going to give the text on the first layer the illusion that it is shattering. So what we're going to do is, let's see, select the third layer, right click on the planes that are on the third layer, press Shift D to duplicate it, right click to cancel the movement, and press M and click the first layer to move it to the first layer. So now click the first layer so that we only see the first layer. Okay, press tab and select this corner vertices here by right clicking it, and press B to box select. Drag your box select over all of these bottom vertices here, press X, and under delete click vertices to delete those vertices. Press tab to go back out of edit mode, and we're going to press M and hold down Shift and click the second layer so that this plane is on both the first and second layers. Alright, so let's see, what we're going to do now is jump to frame 50, press enter, and we're going to start inserting some keyframes. So hold down Shift and select your other layers. Let's see. Alright, so I'm going to press Z to go into wire view. Okay, drag this line we've got up here so that the center origin is on the plane here. Okay, let's see. Okay, and now what we're going to do is on frame 50 we're going to press B to box select these and press G to move this around. See, move these planes up so that they pass the text here. Okay, press I to insert keyframe location for frame 50. Make sure all your planes and flares are box selected, and jump to frame 79. Okay, and bring these planes down past the text. Okay, press I to insert keyframe location for these, and we're gonna jump back to a frame before frame 50 and press play to see how this looks. Alright, pause, and I'm gonna press F12 to render. Alright, now we have to add our flare layer in the compositor. So we're going to jump into the compositor, select this add node, press Shift D to duplicate it, move it over here, hook the output of this add node to the input of the composite node, and let's see, we're going to box select our glowing text render layers nodes. Press Shift D to duplicate them and pull them over here to the side. Put them up to our add node here and change it from glowing text to flare layer. Bring the X blur down to 0 and the Y blur down to 4. We'll see how this looks. Alright, so we've got a nice flare there. We're going to go back into default 3D view, press F11. What I'm going to do is right click on this flare, it would be the big plane here, press Shift D to duplicate it, and I'm going to size it down on the Z axis, and size it up on the X axis, so that we've got a nice flare also going across there. So I'm going to press F12 to render this and see how it looks once again. Alright there. Okay, so you can see our flare going across here. We've got our nice text shatter effect going on here. Press F11 to go back into 3D view, and what we're going to do is jump back to frame 50. We're going to select our particle object here, and we're going to move it up. Okay, So that's just past the planes there. Press I to insert keyframe location. And on frame 79, we're gonna pull this object down a bit, past the gap between these two planes. Okay. Should be about good. Press I to insert keyframe location. Jump back to a frame before frame 50 and see how this looks. Press pause and press F12 to render. Okay. Alright, so now we've got our particles coming down on our text there. So I'm going to press F11 to go back into 3D view. And what I'm going to do now is add a force field for these particles. So jump to layer 4 and we're going to add force field turbulence. Okay, go into the physics section, okay, to the right of the screen here. Change the strength on this turbulence force field to 8. Change the size to 0.02. Alright, and see how this looks. Jump back to a frame before frame 50. Looks pretty nice. Okay, so let's see how this plays out with all the layers selected. I'm gonna jump back to frame 49 and see how this plays. Okay, so at about frame 68, the gap between these planes gets past the text. So what I'm going to do is right click on our particle object here, go into the particle section, and I'm going to change the end of these particles to 68 so that the end frame is 68. And in case you get a weird particle rotation going on here, click cache here and bring the cache step down to 1. Okay? So jump back to a frame before frame 50, play it, see how it looks. It's pretty nice. I'm going to pause and render on this frame. And after this renders, we're going to keyframe our camera. Alright, so now we've got our text shattering there. I'm going to go back into default 3D view and right click on our camera. Okay, jump to frame 50, go into the object data for the camera, hover your cursor over the focal length and press I to insert keyframe for the focal length, and jump back to frame 0 and make the focal length 34 on frame 0. Press I to insert a keyframe for the focal length. Okay, so now the camera's just gonna zoom in before the text shatters. Alright, now we're gonna jump back to frame 50, pause this, jump to frame 50, and we're gonna insert a location keyframe for the camera. So press I and click location. Okay, so split the screen here and change it from 3D view to graph editor. Click this location arrow here, click the X location, press in, and add a modifier. We're going to add modifier noise. Change the scale on this to 3.88. We're going to change the strength to 0.758. And restrict the frame range. Okay, so we're going to make the end frame of this to 79. We're going to make the start frame 50. Let's see. Click the Z location here. Add modifier noise. We're going to bump the scale up to 4.76. We're going to drag the strength down a bit. I'll just go with 0.999. Okay, so now we're going to restrict the frame range for this. Change the end frame to, let's see, 79. Change the start frame to 50. And we'll see how this looks. Now make sure your camera is selected so that your camera is the object that gets the noise modifier. Okay? So as the text shatters down, the camera shakes. Alright? Okay, so now we are going to jump back into the compositor. We're going to have to animate our flare. So what we're going to do is we're going to add color hue saturation value, hook it up after the RGB curves node. Now before the text shatters, we want to see the plane just before the flares, which are on planes, just before the text shatters. Okay, so we don't want to be seeing it before frame 49. So I'm going to jump to frame 49. I'm going to bump the value down to 0, jump to frame 50 so that these flares just appear on frame 50, bump the value up to 1, and insert keyframe for the value. Okay, so now I'm going to jump to frame, let's see, 75, and I'm going to change the value to 0.5 for this flare. Insert keyframe for the value, and jump to frame 79 and bring the value down to 0. So I insert keyframe for the value there, and let's see. Okay, so now we pretty much got our scene set up. We've got our text and our planes and our flares and even our camera animated. So I'm going to show you guys a neat trick. Jump back into the compositor and add color hue saturation value. Hook it up after this add node here. Hook this hue saturation value node to the composite node, and what we're going to do is we're going to change the hue. Okay, so if you're not a big fan of blue, you can change it to whatever color you want by dragging this slider. Okay, I'm just going to drag it up a bit there. Alright, so we've got a nice pinkish red there. Okay, so by dragging the slider, you can change the color to whatever you want. You can adjust the saturation too to adjust how saturated your color is. Okay, but for now, I'm just going to bump it back to the blue I had by going back to 0.5, the default value for the hue. And we're pretty much done with this tutorial. Make sure to save your file, render it out to your settings. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more tutorials from partners in coordinated rendering of ideas, motion, and effects.